Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hire Moment Mastermind. I'm Shira Litzer, happy to be your host this morning, along with my colleague, Vern Schellinger. We are here to answer your job search questions. We have a new face today, Eric. We're just getting to know him a little bit. We'll hear about him a little bit more. And again, open Q&A for everybody. Just to let you know, Eric, just 2 seconds about my background and Vern's. I am a recruiter and a career coach and executive coach. And I kind of play in lots of parts of the workforce. And Vern is a former HR executive. He's also a career coach. And so we bring sort of both sides of the hiring aisle to this conversation. Okay. So we are here to answer any job search questions that you would like. Everything from dealing with recruiters to resumes, interviews, networking, whatever's on your mind. And in has our first question.
Good morning. My question is, there's an organization that advertised for or posted a position, which I applied for. And then about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, there was another position that was similar. So, which I was also interested. So should I apply for both? And like,
great question.
And my cover letter will be kind of similar-ish.
It's a really good question. And so let me give you a generic answer and then we'll go specific to that situation. Okay. Generically, and Vern would love your take on this too. Not the best idea to apply for more than one job to a company. Okay. In general. And the reason is brand confusion, right? Because the employer's like, wait a second, you're applying to this, but you're also applying, but what? They think that you don't know what you want, right? Because of course, all these jobs are different. So in general, I'd recommend to, not necessarily go that direction. Now that said, if the position is that similar, you're going to have to just make a decision. You have to walk a mile in the employer's shoes and say to yourself, if I were them, would I consider my candidacy brand confusion, right? How different is it? Is it a different level? Is it just a slightly different, twist on it? Sometimes there's I'll give you an example. So I know I know in that you're in the association world, right? And so years ago, I was working with somebody and she's a vice president of membership. And at that association, she had under her 4 different like regional managers. Well, it was all the same job, just different regions. Now, obviously that's the same job. It's a little different than what you're talking about. But my point is that if it's something like that, where you're looking at it, you're like, it's really, really close, you might consider it. But then again, to your point, you want to adjust the cover letter, right? And make sure that you get, right? In fact, you could even mention in the cover letter, I am applying for both positions and here's why, but be very nuanced. I don't know if without getting too detailed, if you want to share what they are, or if you want to keep that private, that's fine.
Yeah, one was more business development and the other one was more partnership, but both raising money. Right?
I see. And it's for an association, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Look, I mean, depending, right? I might say yes, but again, I'd be nuanced. Vern, did you have a thought around that?
Well, my thought would be, and this is maybe a long shot, but and again, this is something. If there's any way through networking, you can find a connection to that organization, and ask the question, hey, these 2 jobs are really similar.
Right.
I'm qualified for both. Could you explain the differences to me and so forth and so on? Or you might even try to just directly call the HR department.
Yeah, see what you can do.
You may not get anywhere with that, but
this is like 100+ employee organization. So I imagine, the HR is pretty big and probably inundated, and they've got all the systems and
And I know if we were having a private conversation now, right, I would be going a little more depth here, but knowing what I know about your background, I might recommend the partnerships one for yours. Yeah. Like, of course, I don't know the specifics, but knowing you, I would probably gear you more in that direction anyway.
Yeah. Great. All right.
Good. All right. Well, I'm just so glad to see a full house today. This is great. So who else has a question that we can address? And Michael, Mike Lang is also new to us. I've been working with him now for a minute. So welcome to our illustrious group. Karen, you've got a question.
Hey, everybody. I was here about I guess 6 months ago or so, I was a regular attender at Higher Moment, and I had got a 6-month contract, which is now coming to an end. And appreciate being back with the group. And I guess my question this morning is that I have that when they, your contract's not going to be renewed, did a conversation yesterday, but I did get the PMO lead, because I'm IT project management for those who don't know me. And she said, I'm certainly willing to give you a great referral. And if you want to find something in the larger corporation, Karen, our department's constricting, but I've made some good contacts. So I guess, Shira, I've got a month still with the company. I'm still working for another month. And I was going to fan the flames in seeing about the other contacts I've made. What do you think the appropriate approach should be on that?
Before I answer the question, tell me what you think, what would be your instinctive approach to do this?
I wanted to reconnect because there are some I'm still working with. Just wanted to reconnect with you, and get the details of our upcoming activities we're going to be doing. And just to let you know, my contract is ending. My group is still going to support you going forward, but I will not be with the company. However, I was wondering if there were any project management opportunities, IT project management in your organization that I might be a candidate for.
There it is. There it is. There it is. You said it. Exactly. Your instincts are, yeah. It's really about networking, and it's about showing your value. And especially if you've worked with these folks before and they understand, right, kind of the value that you bring to the table. Simply just putting yourself out there and saying, hey, how can I help? Absolutely. Yeah. You want to spend your time over the next month, shaking hands and kissing babies, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. And my boss said she's totally in support of me. She said she'll give me a referral. Yeah.
And by the way, are you, I apologize, Brent, are you on site or are you remote? Both. I would take the opportunity where possible to do the face-to-face.
Yeah.
Walk into people's offices. You can do that these days again.
Oh, well, I am there. Oh my God. I don't even know. It's been all online. I have to, okay. Look, do the interview thing. Look good. Show up. Hey, can we chat?
If possible, set up a face-to-face. There's nothing like face-to-face, right? And these days we're all trying to do that a little bit more. Right. And that networking, there's nothing like it, right? Yeah, Vern.
I mean, the fact that your current boss is supporting you, I mean, that's such a leg up on any job, because you've already demonstrated your competence and your character and your abilities. And so if there's another hiring manager in the organization, the part, as Shira says, employers are risk averse, they want to make sure they got the right person for the right job. And here's somebody else telling me, yeah, she's got great project management skills. I mean, that's just such a plus for you. So beat as many doors as you can, and hopefully something will turn up.
And do the networking thing where it's not just you networking with the person that but who do they know?
Yeah.
Right. Can they refer you? If they've already done some work with you, you've built us some cred. Say, hey, is there anyone else in the organization outside of this group, right, that could benefit from my skills? And that's a good phrase, by the way, that could benefit from my skills.
That's a perfect point. Yeah, but I met this one. Actually, I met her for the first time. It was like, she was like old home week response. She brought her boss to the meeting. I was so impressed with these people. I looked at them and I said, wow, I just was, okay, thank you. And I'll start with her. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Other questions, other thoughts? Be on any topic that you like in? Sure.
Another instance, I know Vern and Shira, you've been telling us, now a lot of applications that go through the online portal, they use AI. And so this one was where it clearly, there was a question that asked, it says this employer may use AI algorithm to provide an initial comparison on the applicant's education experience, blah, 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 with a job description. And then it says there are no cutoff scores and all applications are visible to the employers. And you could opt out of that because through ADP, it tells you like their own data storing collection policies. And so I was at a quandary, like, do I opt out of that or do I opt in? I mean, I'm kind of creeped out by ADP keeping anything of mine anyway, but do I hurt or help my chances, or is it neutral?
First of
Mhm.
all, this is new territory. Okay. The whole AI thing,
Mm,
it's just
yeah.
coming to life now. We're all sort of navigating. So I don't think anybody's going to have a best practice for you yet. We're just really just evolving with this. So with that said, um, look, at the end of the day, we've all been dealing with AI longer than we think. Okay. And people have had our information and are keeping our information all over the place. So there is no kind of privacy anymore. It just is. We're in an online world, you know that we all know that. So I'm not quite sure if, really in reality, if there's any real difference between what was and what will be. I think they're just, with AI becoming more robust now, I think from a risk management perspective, and Sandy could speak to this because she's a risk queen, that people are trying to protect them. Employers are trying to protect themselves. And we're going to start seeing more regulation around this and all that. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not saying, I'm not going to advise you, right? Because I can't. Other than to say, obviously do what you feel to do. Is it going to harm you? Probably not, because that's the whole point of them giving you an option. Right. But again, I think it's just too early to tell kind of how these things are
Yeah,
going to play out.
I feel the same way, that this is the first time where it's outright telling you, and it's also giving you an opportunity to opt out. So maybe at this early stage, even on the employer side, they're going to see maybe half the people opt in, half the people
I would
opt out.
imagine.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah, in fact, you're the first person I've heard so far say that someone's actually acknowledging we're going to use AI. So we'll probably see more of this. So thanks for bringing it to all of our attention.
Yeah.
We'll kind of have to see how this all evolves. Yeah. Sandy?
Yeah, so I would say, and like, listen to your gut and do what you feel comfortable in doing and what information you want to disclose. I don't think, and the experts on the line could chime in once they learn more, but I don't think it would harm you if you decided to opt out, because I mean, you have your rights to your data. And mind you, I mean, the law is also starting to get developed around the use of AI.
Right.
Well, I mean, we all have, if you're paying attention to the news, you've seen like the Actors Guild is on strike because, and that's a part of that AI issue of them using, their likeness, and not being paid for it, all the way down to, machine learning, and them, the systems learning how to find a candidate. So there's just a lot of legislation has yet to be written around the use of AI. So at this point in time, this early point in the game kind of point in time, I would just say, do what you feel comfortable in doing and what you feel comfortable in disclosing. I would be a little shocked to see if it would eliminate you from any job search possibility, just because you decided to opt out from their machine learning technology.
I'd agree. Vern, any thoughts?
No, I don't have anything to add. It's all
It's all new.
It is all new. Stay tuned though.
Right.
I had a question about, let me lower my hand. I had a question about what kind of questions do you recommend to kind of sniff out what kind of work environment there is? A good healthy work environment, a good work balance. I mean, employers say, oh, we have a great work balance.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Versus, something that's it's not a good work-life balance, or it's even toxic. Anybody have any good idea, a good question to ask?
Vern, do you want to start? Because I've got some.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think Cheryl will say the same thing. It's going to be, I mean, you can ask the question how honest the answer is from the employer. You might have to take it with a grain of salt. So I said I was a customer service fanatic earlier. So when I interviewed for one position, and the culture and all of their vision statement, mission statement talked about customer service, I said, can you give me, this is what your mission statement says. Can you give me some specific examples of how the organization has worked towards that mission? Can you give me an example of how a customer has written a response to the organization saying, wow, this is the greatest customer service experience I've ever had? In other words, ask them a specific question about the work environment and ask them to give you an example of how what they say they do is actually what actually happens.
Okay, I did meet with an employer this week, who's the president of the organization who I would be working with, and I specifically asked him, I mean, there's in my mind, there's like 3 or 4 or 5 elements of a healthy workplace, and one of it for me is communication and how well the leadership communicates. And here I'm talking to the president, so I asked him about his communication style and to give me an example where his communication style either worked or didn't work. And he was honest. He gave me an example. They're about to move their location from one area to another. Actually, the new location's even closer to me. Yay. And he said that, he kind of announced it to the entire company via like a town hall type of thing, and it didn't go over well. He got a lot of fire, if you will, I think is what he called it. It's fire on its of the moving, and people just didn't understand why they were doing it, and it was going to cost more money or whatever the case may be. And I said, what would you do differently in the future? And he said, I really just don't know. I thought I was just being honest and upfront, because we had gotten on the conversation of change management. And I said, well, can I recommend some things for you in the future? And he said, sure, absolutely. And I said, when it comes to big changes like that, I say communicate early, communicate often, and be consistent with your message across the board. And while you're always going to have naysayers, because everybody's not going to get on board immediately, when you have the majority of the folks on board, that's where you're going to see the better traction and the better response. He seemed to like that answer, but I appreciated his honesty in telling me, yeah, I fell flat on this one thing, and it kind of gave me an insight to his communication style, which we all could stand a little tweaking on that sometimes. But the thing that drove me home with his response was that he was telling me about a time that he fumbled. And he's like, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to do this, but I'm open to change. And that's what's really important to me, that he's open to good advice and change and doing something differently if it didn't work well. So to me, I felt like that was a good response from his end. But, if anybody else has any ideas on how,
Sandy, it's so important what you just brought up. And I'd like to bring it up to a macro level. And then I want to come back down to kind of address what you just shared. So when you think about culture, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because we don't normally do on this call. When you think about culture, I want you to think about it in 3 ways: organizational culture, departmental culture, and then the, if you will, culture, the relationship, right, between you and the supervisor. Mm-hmm. They can be three different things. So organizationally, some organizations have a very pronounced culture. I always bring up Amazon. If I ever talk about culture, I always bring up Amazon. And the reason is because they have a very pronounced culture. It's all over the web. Like, they have their 14 leadership principles. They are very, very clear that they are a challenge everything culture. It is what it is. Okay. Organizationally, which sort of cascades into everything, and it cascades into their performance management. So, if you do any research, that if you're going to go over to Amazon, that's the organizational culture, right? Some cultures are like that. However, there are some where it's very much about department by department. And that, Sandy, right? We've all been in organizations like that, where this department is this and this department is that. What is the departmental culture? But then also, what's the relationship with the supervisor? And it's 3 different kinds of things. Yeah. Because when you talk about work-life balance, for example, that can be organizational. We here at our resident, we value and we actually, encourage and promote, we want people to, take that time off, whatever it is. Whereas it could be a certain department that's more this or more that. Okay. So number 1, think of it in those 3 buckets. Number 2, think about what's important to you. For example, you just mentioned communication, but you actually also mentioned something else. It's sort of this transparency and humility, right? Yes. Vulnerability, right? So you were looking for some deeper things there. And I want to encourage you to everybody on this call, think about what's important to you in your next culture. And remember, organizations are full of people. It's people. People change. Literally, there's attrition, right? New leadership, new whatever. So cultures can change because of that. People themselves are frail. We're all fallible. Okay. And we all have, and so it depends on what's really important to you. And so Sandy, for you, it sounds like one of the things that you're looking for is in this case, a CEO, because you report to the CEO and that person's right. Transparency, vulnerability, this, that, and the other, what's important. And then ask a question just like you did. Because it's okay, look, it's okay for you to interview the employer. Most people don't think that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Most people
absolutely.
don't realize that, right? Most people think it's a
Right.
very lopsided conversation. It's all about the employer vetting me, and they sit like good little children with their hands in their lap. No, it is equal, right? No, I'm not saying that you can take necessarily half the time to do questions, because it may not work out that way. But your question should not just be about the role, for example. Your
Right.
question should also be about culture. It should also be about fit. It should also incorporate the kind of values that you're seeking. And how can you incorporate that into your conversation? When an employer asks you what's called a behavioral interview question, which is a describe a time when you this, tell me about a time when you that, you can do that too. Sandy, it sounds like you did that, right? Tell me about a time when, your communication was, didn't work out, or where you had to eat some crow or whatever it is. And where the organization needed to, it needed to level up, right? See what they say. The other last thing that I'll comment on this is that if you ever ask a question that has to do with culture and whatever, let's say you just ask it very generically, describe the culture here, something very open-ended. How they respond is just as important as what they say. Okay. And especially when you're doing it, whether it's Zoom, face-to-face, whatever it is, watch the body language, listen for tone of voice, and very importantly, listen for if they are being cagey. And here's what that looks like. There's a difference. Okay. So if somebody's really being authentic and they're like effusive, I mean, the culture is fantastic. Trust me, they will use expressive language. And they will get very animated, and their eyes will get big, and they'll lean forward, and they'll be all excited, and you can tell. And then they might even give examples. Oh, but here's an example of this, and we have a social committee, and they do that, and they won't be able to shut up, right? Because they're just so excited. Conversely, if it maybe isn't as much of a good culture, they'll tend to use aspirational language. First of all, they'll slow down, and they'll measure their words, and they're like, well, great question, Sandy. So we are aspiring to, we are working toward, now, I'm not saying that they're not there yet. Now, I'm not saying that you should turn away a job like that, because it very well may be that you're one of the people that can help to transform the culture. Maybe you're the light in the darkness, if you will, that can help, right? Help them. Maybe the Lord is sending you there to help them do that. And maybe you have a superpower in that, I mean, your relationship building skills or whatever, but it's good to know that they're actually aspiring rather than they're already there. So listen for the how they're saying what they're saying. Is that helpful?
It is. And in fact, you made me remember the interview I had with the job that I'm departing with, and about the work-life balance. And they said, oh yes, we promote a good work-life balance, and we want people to take time off and refresh and completely unplug. In reality, to your point about being at departmental, or that was like talking organizational, but departmental, my boss at the time was like, oh, we always have to be on.
Right.
So, and
Right.
oh, by the way, whenever I went on vacation, I had to take my laptop.
Right.
First year of being there, I went out of the country to Peru and Bolivia, and he made me take the laptop with me.
Right.
You realize you're going to a communist country, right? You realize you're having me take the company asset. We are a government contractor. You want me to take it there? And oh, by the way, I'm going into the jungle at times, so I'm not taking the laptop with me because there's no internet service. I can't connect to a monkey. Okay.
Well,
And he insisted that, we'll check emails when you can. And of course, when I got back and I talked to our facility security officer, she goes, you had to do what? And I'm like, this is what I had to do.
Let me interrupt. Remember when Shira said the 3 different cultures?
Mhm.
So the organization can say one thing, but your boss can say something very different.
That's what I was saying. It's
And that's what
departmental
was
and
happening, right?
supervisor.
Yeah.
So
It's a culture within a culture.
yes,
Culture within a culture. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I just, as way of an example, I just had a conversation with a human resource executive who's doing a job search, and I won't name the companies here, but she said, all I hear is great things about company A. She said, boy, I'd love to work there. Well, I happen to know someone who works at company A, okay? The person that works at company A is somebody I worked with at company B, okay? So I'm going to connect the person I know at company A with this HR executive, just so she can hear a little bit more about the culture and what it's like and so forth and so on. And maybe, and the person that, that I used to work with said, she said, I actually know some people in HR that I could introduce you to. So that's all good. The person at company A said to me, Vern, she said, now I know how dysfunctional the culture was at the company you and I worked together with, because she's experiencing a completely different culture. And very few companies, in my mind, get culture right. It's just such a humongous, again, as Shira said, there's like 3 cultures and so the example you had where the CEO was willing to and humble enough to accept your, is a telling. That's a behavior.
Yeah.
And that's what culture is really about. All of the words in the culture statement are about behaviors and how we say we want to act. But what actually happens when people haven't, what are the real behaviors that happen day to day in the organization? Are they exactly the same? In a lot of organizations, they're simply not.
Yeah, and it sounded like that was the case. And I just, I appreciated the answer. And I even said to him, I said, look, it sounds like that was a good lessons learned for you. And I appreciate your honesty. And I have to say, like, you being the president of the organization, you set the tone for all of this. People
Right.
want to follow your lead. So, the fact that you have some humility around this tells me that you recognize that, hey, there's some areas for improvement. And and then he asked me, well, what would you have done? And I said, and then that's what I explained, when it comes to change management, communicate early, communicate often, be consistent, and that tends to do the trick. But good answers, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just and go for values, just like Vern was saying, right? What values are important to you and how are they walking out their values? How do they, and some people measure it, right? Some people actually hold people accountable in their performance reviews to see how much they're aligning with corporate values. So those kinds of questions are good. Yeah, thanks for teeing that up, Sandy.
Yeah.
Ty.
I applied for a part-time position, a professional job. It's 20+ hours a week. 2 questions regarding this is one, if I interview, how do I convince them I'm going to stay? And is there any?
You just froze.
Association.
Ty, I'm so sorry. You froze right where you were saying the second part of your question. You said, how do I convince them I'm going to stay? And then what was the second piece?
The second piece would be, how do I convince them that I'm going to stay?
Sorry, we got that piece.
Okay. Am I obligated to stay for a job that's 20+ hours a week?
Yeah. So here's the thing with part-time work. No employer should ever expect somebody to be there for a long period of time, unless the person's life situation is such that it makes sense. For example, let's say a person is a stay-at-home parent, okay? And they say, look, I am full-time parent, but I am happy to work from 10 to 2 while my kids are at school. That's going to be for the next 5 years, right? Or the person is a military spouse and whatever, right? Like there's some sort of life circumstance that is going to convince the employer that, hey, in my life now, like it totally makes sense. Ty, that happens not to be your situation, right? You're actually looking for a full-time job, but you sounds like you're open to something part-time. The reality is you've got to think to yourself, how long are you willing to commit, right? You don't want to treat a part-time job like a temporary job. It's not. 2 different things. Permanent part-time and part-time permanent is part-time permanent. So you want to commit to it just like you would a regular job if it makes sense for your life. If you're not willing to do that, you may want to rethink, right? Is this the right time for you to even apply for this? It's not even a matter of convincing them. You have to feel yourself. Is it right? And if it is, great. And maybe you pick up 2 part-time jobs and that's fine, but you'd have to be able in yourself to know that that's what you're going to do. And then you would communicate that I'm happy to do part-time, and then I'm going to look for something else to supplement my income. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mike. Oh, Mike, you're on mute.
There we go.
Uh-huh.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. A question, especially regarding the AI conversation, made me start to think, because unfortunately, I have been seeing that question come up more and more. Also, when we fill out some of the applications online, they have the voluntary disclose information, which it seems like everybody's using the same information, where they ask the gender, the race,
Right.
preferred pronouns.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with any of it. They also ask about veteran and disabilities.
Yeah.
The disabilities is the one that actually I get stuck on. I don't get stuck on necessarily because I say I don't. But when I read the fine print, I do have 1 or 2 conditions that would fall under that category, but I don't feel that it inhibits my job performance or my job capabilities. So I always answer no to that. But I'm curious how everybody else feels about
So
that
here's
question.
the thing, and Vern, I know you're in obviously HR, right? So like, I'd love for us to both opine on this. Here's the situation. There's a couple things that you should consider. First of all, from their side, and then from your side. From their side, the reason why any organization might be asking about this is for their DEI statistics. Okay, so organizations that are trying to demonstrate to the world, if you will, hey, we are looking for diversity. We are asking for all these things because we want to make sure we're having a diverse pool of candidates. So that's number one from their side. Here's the interesting positive, outcome of that for you. Anything that they ask, they are now holding themselves sort of, if you will, extra accountable for your response. So I know you didn't ask the question, but embedded possibly within your question, or maybe if anyone else would think about this, is that let's just say you check off, yes, I have a disability. They are now extra obligated not to discriminate against you because of that answer. Okay, they're holding themselves accountable. They're actually then obligated to say, do you need a reasonable accommodation? That's the HR term for, right? And so actually answering thoughtfully and thoroughly, if you are in a minoritized category or whatever it is, can actually be a protection. I'm not saying you should necessarily volunteer, but if they're actually asking you, that means they're holding themselves accountable. So that's completely up to you as to whether you want to answer and how you want to answer, but please know that you're actually more protected than you think. Vern, did you have other? Yeah.
My thought with that is I don't mind answering yes, and I know that they want to, I mean, their tally of how many people would fall under DEI and so forth. But I also don't want to think in the back of their mind that whatever that I had checked off is going to inhibit me.
I wouldn't worry about that. I really wouldn't, because the fact that they're asking means that they're prepared for the response, right? And then you could always elaborate if you felt to do that, a note somewhere or in the interview, say, look, I checked this box. Please know that this, whatever the thing is that I checked, is actually not going to happen. I don't need a reasonable accommodation. You could even say it that way. And they'll say, okay, great. But even if you did, okay, great. Like they're not, either which way, it's really not a problem. It's just something that they want to know.
But could they possibly use that as a strike against me, even though they wouldn't admit that?
No, that's my point, is that the whole point of this is holding themselves accountable. They're not allowed to anyway, but now they're really, really not allowed to, because now they've asked you the question, you've answered it, and now they're held accountable. If for whatever reason they discriminated against you based upon any of the boxes you checked, they've got EEOC problems all over the place. And they know that. And that's why they're asking that. I'm telling you, Mike, it's actually a protection for you, the fact that they're asking, because now what they are held liable for the information that they're given. In fact, I'll say it this way, put the application aside. Just in a regular verbal interview, okay? If a candidate ever volunteers information. Now, remember, the employer hasn't asked, but if a candidate volunteers information, that now puts them in what we call a protected class: age, race, creed, color, sex, national, all the great EEOC term. If you ever volunteer that information, disability, whatever, the employer is held liable for that information. So much so that employers refrain typically from, they used to at least, refrain from asking the question, la, 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 I don't want to know, don't tell me, please don't tell me, right? Because the second you tell them, they are literally liable. Like, they have to document it. They have to make sure that there are protections, that you are not discriminated against either in the hiring process or if they need to let you go or anything like that. I mean, it's very, very litigious. So you sharing that actually protects you more than if you didn't.
I know that firsthand because of a family member, so yeah. I'm well aware of that. But my point, I guess, maybe I haven't been clear about it, is they can find an excuse not to bring me for an interview for anything.
Sure.
And they don't have to tell me.
That's true.
But if I check the box under this litany of things that they consider disabilities, they don't have to divulge the reason why they didn't invite
It's
me.
True, but understand the fact that they're even going that extra step of asking you the questions means that they are holding themselves to a more rigorous standard than other employers. That means that if that says to me that they have almost like an internal audit going on, and I would imagine that if a candidate was turned down, that somebody in HR is saying, okay, Mr. Hiring Manager, right? Are you sure that it's not because of any of these reasons, right? Like, there should be an extra check and balance there because they are actually going to the extra step of asking this question. That's my opinion. And Vern, I mean, you can share.
And on this point,
oh, sure.
I got a real world example of this. Okay.
Please.
It's really important that you're honest in that disclosure. Because here's why. If you're not honest in that disclosure and you do have a disability that requires accommodation, you get hired and then you tell the employer, then you put an employer potentially in a very precarious situation, and there ipso facto you'll be in one as well. They're going to wonder why you weren't honest in your application in the first place, and two, they may not have the ability to accommodate you. And my real world example is that, I had somebody on my team. I actually got this person, they were temp to perm position. So they didn't apply directly with my company, but with an agency, but they didn't disclose their disability, and they came on board and their disability interfered with their ability to do their job. And that person, didn't disclose that until the very end when I was showing her the door because her performance was poor. And then she said, well, I have this disability and that's why my performance is poor. And I'm like, sorry for you, Jack, too late. Had I known, we could have made an accommodation, but I don't know that. And that's something you should have disclosed to the agency before you came on board. I wouldn't have discriminated against you as long as I knew that. And of course, I would never discriminate against anybody anyways. But that being said, I mean, at least if I know ahead of time as the hiring manager and your employer, as long as they know ahead of time, they at least know that they can have that accommodation for you. No employer can resist or stop hiring you because you have a disability. That's a violation of the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, so, I think. And I think, Mike, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Stan. I think, because I was looking at Mike's chat, I think, Mike, what you're trying to say is that could subliminally, maybe they discriminate even though they're not supposed to. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and I mean, you could find that they could subliminally, decide, even not on a disability, they just may not
on anything. Yeah, like, and will that increase your? You're saying, will it liken the chance, right, that they'll subliminally discriminate, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? Look, people are people. Okay, of course, we can never know exactly what somebody's going to do. If you have, with everything, just, again, Sandy's in risk management, so she knows this, you're always having to weigh pros and cons and the risk benefit and all of that stuff. In my professional opinion, the benefit outweighs the risk, right? Mm-hmm. It's a personal choice. At the end of the day, they are asking you a question. You can choose to answer or not. We're just suggesting you may want to choose to go with it. But if you really feel like, maybe whatever this thing is going to possibly, cause discrimination, look, I can't say not to, because again, it's completely your choice. But I think it's important to listen to what Sandy said, because if you don't disclose and then something comes out, right? But on the other hand, you are saying that whatever this thing is not going to impede your ability. You're not going to need an accommodation. So at the end of the day, it's really your choice.
And
Yeah,
to be honest, if
like-
it turns out they discriminate against you for that, do you want to work for that
Well,
organization?
there you go. Exactly.
In
Right.
the first place? I mean,
That's
it's,
right.
that'll be telling in and of itself, one way or the other.
Well,
Is that-
Mike, what Shira, mentioned, and that's how you began the conversation. You said, you have a couple of, you referred to them as disabilities, but you said there are no way, from your standpoint, they're no way going to affect your ability to do the job. So again, as Shira said, it's your personal choice. If you don't feel comfortable answering it, don't answer it, and then you move on. And I mean, you still have to get the interview, right? Before you're going to get the job. So,
Yeah, just think, but just weigh it out, right? If you're feeling it's not going to affect your job, not going to affect your job. If it would affect your job, to Sandy's point, better for them to know so they can provide an accommodation. And this is right. When we, by the way, when we answer all these questions, we're really answering for everybody here. So we're trying to kind of give everybody the full scope, because you never know, somebody in this call could be, facing that situation. So Mike, does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we've had a very robust conversation today. This is really good. So I actually want to bring up something. And Mike, do you mind if I call you out based on our conversation yesterday for the situation we talked about?
No, not at all.
Okay, because Mike's going to get a little vulnerable with us. So I got a call from Mike. Mike and I are doing career coaching together, and so I got a note from Mike. Was it yesterday? I think, saying, "Hey, or the other day, right? I've got this." By the way, had Mike not agreed to do this, I just would have redacted this story, because I think it's just a good story anyway. So Mike said, "Hey, the other day, I've got this interview coming up with blah, 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 blah organization, and not quite my level, but, I'm just going to," ready, here's the phrase, "interview for the practice." Okay. I have been a recruiter since 1994. I've been a career coach for the last decade. I cannot tell you how many people over the years have said, "I want to interview for the practice." Okay. I appreciate why some people would give you that advice. Practicing your interviewing is perfectly legitimate and acceptable. Practicing it with an employer that you don't intend to accept the job, not something you really want to go for. Okay. I want you to walk a mile in the employer's shoes. In fact, I know some of you certainly on this call have been employers, you've been hiring managers. Imagine if there was a candidate that you were all excited about, you get on that call and you're ready to go. You're the employer, right? And meanwhile, the candidate has absolutely no intention of accepting the job, right? How would you feel? Okay. And this is the conversation that Mike and I had. And not only that, but if they really love you and you turn down the job, what ends up happening is you're now suddenly the benchmark. You're the top candidate. Now they're comparing everybody to you, and then the job stays open for 3 more months because they're trying to find another Sandy, right? That kind of thing. So Mike and I had this conversation, and then he made a decision. So Mike, do you want to share your side of it, and then the lesson that you learned out of all this?
Sure. I've been working for the I've been working for the same employer for more than 16 years. So admittedly, I haven't been out in the interview world for quite some time. And I had always heard and thought that it's good exercise for you to interview as practice. It's the best way to prepare for your next job, even if it's not going to be that prospective employer. So I did contact Shira about this, and I'll put it nicely that she gave me a slap to the face over the phone. It was nice.
Very loving. I was very loving about it.
That is true. But it was a good shock to reality. And my first thing was really to defend myself, saying, well, it could lead to another position. They could refer me. I mean, I guess all those things are entirely possible. But what I did realize and they did not disclose what the salary was. So Shira had suggested that I follow up with them. and ask why they were interested in me, and perhaps see if they would volunteer information like salary. And once they offered the salary level, there was just no way I could accept it. So I wrote a nice message to them, and I said, I appreciate it, but I don't think it's going to be a productive time for you. And I really don't want to take away that potential slot for another candidate who is a good fit for both parties. So I really felt kind of selfish, actually, that I was going to take up that person's time, forget about my time, but take up that person's time for a job that really wasn't appropriate for me. So I thank Shira, because I was so excited to get that first interview, and so eager to enter the workforce that I didn't realize about not only about the selfishness of me, but actually the negativity that could cause me with that potential employer, as well as people who they might talk to. So I'll stop there, but I will thank Shira in public for that note to me.
Well, thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing, because it is important, right? And it's just one of those topics that comes up every once in a while. And I'm just glad to have an opportunity to share, right? We always want to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes and make sure that we are being sensitive, because there are two sides to this, right? There's your side. And by the way, when I work with employers, I'm constantly preaching, if you will, to them too, about your side, right? About the candidate side. And it's very important for everybody to be respectful, right? Of what everybody else is going through. And by the way, I've had so many times where employers, Mike and you and I talked about this yesterday, where an employer, has an experience as a hiring manager, and then all of a sudden they become a job candidate. It's so easy to forget everything that you experienced as a hiring manager, right? HR people go through this a lot. I don't know, Vern, if you ever experienced this yourself when you were in a job search, but when you suddenly become a candidate, it's like you literally forget what it was like to be a recruiter, and it can be that way. So it's just always important to just walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, and in the it is very important to practice interviewing, but there's so many ways to practice interviewing today that make it easy. Google the 10 most likely questions you're going to get on an interview. Write that up, send it to your friend, create a Zoom call, have your friend ask you the questions, and then watch yourself on the Zoom call. And you can evaluate yourself in terms of how clear you were in your answer, where you stumbled, where and that alone could go a long way to help you get better at interviewing. And obviously you can work with a career coach. There's as Shira knows, there's lots of organizations in the DC area that provide programs where you can get some interview practice. So
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. We really appreciate your vulnerability. Thank you. All right, Karen.
It's 2023. How has the job environment changed? And we were talking about AI earlier. What differences should we anticipate in job search, interviewing, resume, all that stuff? What are the trends you've seen? I don't ask.
Yeah. You're specifically looking at trends in interviewing?
No, in the job market in general.
The job market in general. So the one of the trends, well, let's put AI aside, because we talked about that earlier. Like, we just don't know what's going on yet, because both candidates are using AI for like resumes, things of that nature, right? And employers are now using it for recruiting. So that sort of remains to be seen. What I would share, and this, again, I'm glad you brought this up, and that has to do with the competition. Things have changed. And has to do with remote work. So here's what's going on, right? In fact, I'll frame it in a conversation I had with a client the other day, and I'd worked with her years ago, and a few years ago, and she called me out of the blue. She goes, Shira, I'm suddenly back in the job market after few years in the job, and all of a sudden I'm getting no hits. Like nobody's responding to me. Crickets, what's going on? And I gave her what I think is a fairly legitimate possibility. And it's like goes like this. Once we all went remote, a lot of companies chose to stay remote, not hybrid, like chose to stay remote. I don't know what percentage, but a good percentage of employers have decided to do that. When that happened, and they started looking for job candidates, they started posting the job nationally, which means that now they have a candidate pool that is national. Now, from a recruiter's perspective, that's a lovely thing. Hey, I can get my pick of the litter. I can get candidates from California and Colorado and wherever. Guess what that means for you, Karen, on your side? You now are competing with the entire country, where you used to be competing geographically. Okay?
Entire world. Entire world. There is a massive amount of great IT people that are not.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there are some employers who do have some legal restrictions, like they can't hire somebody from XYZ state or country, but you're absolutely right. It's actually a global market, not even just national. And so it literally happened overnight, and suddenly your competition exploded. So one of the things, there are a number of ways to overcome this, right? But one of the things that you want to do, actually, anybody on this call, if you are open to working on site, full-time, hybrid, whatever, do a geographically local search first. That is going to increase your chances. And here's why. Because what I just said about the whole remote thing, right, being increased competition and good for the employer, employers are actually having the opposite problem when they do a hybrid search. Why? Because there are lots of candidates who now will only work remotely. They've just limited their pool. And as a recruiter, I have had that problem. When I've picked up a search, and now I say to the employer, is it a remote search? Is it a local search? And they go, well, it's local, very hybrid, whatever. I'm like, do you realize, Mr. Employer, that you've shrunk your pool because there are a whole bunch of candidates that will not consider hybrid jobs. And as a result, right, they have this very limited pool. Now, but that's good for you because now your competition is really small. Okay. So number one, local search where possible, if you are open to. Now, look, some people's circumstances are such that you can't work hybrid, and that's fine. But if you can, go for that. And number two, this is the topic that we've always brought up, which is find an internal champion. It is that much more important these days to get your resume noticed, okay? Because you are competing with the whole wide world, and you've got to have somebody, if possible, to airlift your resume out of that applicant tracking system and wave it in front of the hiring manager and say, hey, please notice Karen. So going onto LinkedIn, popping in the name of the organization into the search bar, right? And, hitting the people button and looking at all the employees there can be really, really helpful, because then you can say, okay, do I have a first level, hopefully it's at least a second level contact there, where you can leverage the relationship of that first level, right, connection and say, hey, Susie, I noticed you're connected to John, who's the hiring manager, or John is the HR person, the CEO, somebody there who could get you noticed, and have that person flag your resume. Okay. Mm-hmm. So those two things, geographically local, as well as, leveraging the internal champion.
Okay. That phrase that I have heard you say consistently, arrive before your resume.
Yeah. Show up before your resume. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other thoughts?
No, that's all on target. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Mac, I noticed that you are new with us. Did you want to introduce yourself or maybe come on video? That would be great. I'd love to hear how we can help you. This is an open Q&A for any job search question you have. Okay. If you want to remain just an observer, that's perfectly fine too. All right. Any other questions that we can address for anybody?
Kind of related to what Michael was saying earlier. I guess it depends, in one application, because they wanted some international perspective, and I've lived abroad. I did put that in there, and to make it relatable. But in one application, it was an online portal. Is there anything else you want to tell us about us, or tell us about you? And I put something like that, like, you know, because I've been exposed to, you know, the lots of international perspective and coming from, and I said, my, you know, coming from a background of Korean heritage, you know, and, you know, you know, I embrace diversity. But I volunteered that information up front in my application. So, was that something I shouldn't have done? Or, you know, was it okay?
Or did you feel that there was a challenge there, like that you maybe shouldn't have done that?
No, I want to kind of give them a perspective that, you know, because, you know, now a lot of some of these organizations ask up front, like, what is your, you know, I don't know, this, because I think it's in their mission, you know, they'll ask about, you know, diversity. How do you, you know, so I was just kind of preempting or kind of volunteering that information.
I would say these days, any job candidate who comes from what some people call a minoritized background, okay? A lot of phrases for this. I'll just use that particular phrase. Can actually be extremely helpful in the job search process, because employers really are, many are very, very, very sensitive to and welcoming of and proactively reaching out to folks from very diverse backgrounds. So actually that can be these days a very important thing. In fact, I'll share, it was really funny. Several years ago, I had a career coaching client who happened to be a Black woman. And I'm mentioning that because she, for many years, felt very reluctant to post her picture on LinkedIn. Okay, she felt like, right, and that was not uncommon. Okay, and I said to her a few years ago, and this was in 2019. This was a year before George Floyd incident happened. And I said to her, look, I said, I play with HR people. I'm watching the DEI trends happen. I really, really recommend that you put your picture up there, because actually, not only do I feel like you will probably not be discriminated against, I think it actually could quite work to your benefit, because that's what's going on now, is that there's such a receptivity to people from diverse backgrounds. That she was incredulous. She's like, no way, couldn't believe it. I said, no, trust me on this. And sure enough, right, we had a tipping point the following year. And now we see what happened, right? There are so many employers that are truly so proactive around hiring folks, you know, from these backgrounds. And so, so personally, I think that's actually could be very helpful, to be full disclosure, because we're just seeing such a pendulum shift as it relates to that topic. Is that helpful? Ty?
Just to springboard off Ing's question in terms of the block and ATS, is there anything you recommend if they say, is there anything else we should know about you? Should you reemphasize in your resume, or should you just, I've been saying I'm a great fit because da 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 da. Is there anything else that should go in there?
In terms of why they should hire you? Yeah. So
any suggestions?
Yeah. So when it comes to an application, and you mentioned the ATS, the applicant tracking system, which is the big, massive database where your resume gets lost in cyberspace, it's all about keywords. And then it's not just any keywords. It's the keywords that directly relate, the hard skills that directly relate to the job. So let me make sure we're all clear on hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills are your functional skills. Soft skills are your behavioral skills. When people are vetting your resume, they're vetting you based on your hard skills. So in a case like Karen's, right, it's going to be hard skills that are related to project management. Sandy, it's going to be things probably related to risk management. Things probably related to partnership development, that kind of stuff, okay? They are not vetting your resume based on your soft skills or based on anything else that's sort of intangible. Team player, organized, strategic, analytical, those kinds of things. They will vet you in your interview, right? Around those things. Absolutely. They absolutely want to know who you are. But to get you from resume to interview is, can they do the job? To get you from interview to hire is how good of a fit are they going to be? Okay. It's generally speaking, not that they're not vetting on hard skills in the interview, they are, but it's more soft skills. So when you're answering the question, what else? Highly recommend that you focus on your hard skills. Emphasize again that which actually qualifies you functionally for the role, rather than things that are extra like team player, or I'm really aligned with your mission, things of that nature. That's my opinion, because if as it relates to the applicant tracking system, because that they're looking for keywords. If you're writing your cover letter, absolutely talk about alignment with mission and soft skills and other kinds of things. But for the purpose of the ATS, I would go after hard skills.
So in that box then, are you saying that you should try to reiterate the keywords that you think they're looking for?
Absolutely would.
Okay.
Absolutely would. Yes, yes. But again, hard skill, functional skills. In your case, customer service, right? That kind of stuff. Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ty, you were saying you're a great fit for the job, and so to Shira's point, I'm a great fit for the job because, you know, I've demonstrated these following skills, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Other questions, thoughts before we wrap up? We love your in that puppy is just adorable. You know, if we didn't know we didn't know there's a puppy there, it looks like a virtual background.
Hi, they're talking about you. They're talking about you.
It's very cute.
He's
For
paying-
those
it looks like he's
inclined, are
paying
you willing-
attention too.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Brian?
I said, it looks like he's paying attention.
He is. He's learning something about his job search as a.
We're talking about, yes, we are.
Cute.
Uh,
All right, Karen.
For those so inclined, would you be willing to put your LinkedIn profiles in the chat? I found a couple of you, but I'm interested in connecting. I will do too.
That's a great point, Karen. In fact, every once in a while we go around the room and do a little bit of networking. So why don't we use that as the prompt, and we'll kind of wrap up with that. Okay. So the way we're going to do this is we'll go around the Zoom room. I'll let you know in advance who's on my screen in what order, so you can be prepared, and state the following. Of course, your name. I mean, we can see your name, but state your name, the kind of role that you're looking for. It's what I call your lane, right? Your profession. And then what I call your community. So if you have a specific industry, like again, In or Mike, you know, you're in the association industry. By the way, In and Mike, I've wanted you to connect anyway. You're in first cousin lanes, but I think you could also be helpful for each other because of just your world. So highly encourage you to connect anyway. But anyway, your name, your profession, if you have an industry or sector, and if you don't, that's fine. And then the type of organization that you're trying to look for it. And even if you have a specific name, like I'm looking for a job in Marriott or whatever, there might be somebody on this call that has a connection. So maybe a target company or two that we can think about. Okay, so name, profession, industry if you have one, and then a target company or a target kind of organization. All right, so my people, my list is Eric, Ty, Sandy, Mike, Karen, In. Eric.
Hey, good morning, everybody. And just wanted to say, appreciate being here. It's my first time on the call. So thanks for asking great questions and helping me feed off the positive energy. I am a customer success manager. I'm looking for a new role as an individual contributor. I'm focused on small to mid-size tech companies that work with software as a subscription product. So any warm introductions or suggestions on job leads are appreciated. I'm pretty industry agnostic at this point in time, and just looking for the perfect fit for myself.
Eric, I actually have a client. She's not in SaaS, okay, but she is in CX and has been for a long time. You never know, could be a connection. Could you do me a favor? Would you email me directly and I will put you in touch? Okay,
Certainly.
I'm gonna put my email in the chat and just remind you of my name. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, sure. Ty.
Good morning. Of course, my name's Ty Smith. Looking for a customer service or member services job. Looking in the financial area, insurance area, association area. If anybody has any leads, please feel free to email me. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your input this morning.
Yeah, and just so for folks who don't know, Ty is actually a career shifter. He used to be like a director of communications and sort of had another career, and now he's sort of downshifting and is intentionally looking for more of a sort of frontline customer service job. Eric, I don't know, maybe there's a lower level job in your world that could be appropriate. So maybe the two of you want to connect on that. All right, Sandy.
My mute button. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Levy. I am at the how to explain myself. Hey, another cup of coffee. I work at the executive level for contract management and risk management. The industries I've worked in and I'm working in is government contracting. I'm looking to pivot to financial institutions. Although I'm talking to government contractors still, because that's the wheelhouse. And I have a target financial institution that I'm currently speaking with. I've networked there. I know their chief HR officer who's got me in contact with their chief compliance officer, and that's Navy Federal. And the reason why I'm attracted to them, because they're supposedly a very good employer. At least that's what I hear from people that have worked for them. A really good company culture. And as you heard earlier, that's very important to me. And what was your final question, Shira?
If there was, if there was a specific company you're trying to target that we could network with you.
Yep, that's me in a nutshell. But yeah, I'm looking at like the VP and above level for either contract management, risk management, corporate compliance.
Great, thanks, Sandy. Mike.
Thanks for contributions today. I've been working for an association for, as I said, it's about 16 plus years. I've worked for other associations as well, and I really do like that segment of the industry. And so I'm hoping to continue that path, as I was a vice president of education and member of programs. And I was really gravitating toward the education and training aspect of it. So I'm looking for, ideally, to land a position with another association and help its members in the fields of education and training. So I'm happy to connect with everyone. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Great, thanks. And Karen?
Hi, everyone. I'm an IT program manager, project manager, used to live in the DC area, now living down in Research Triangle in North Carolina. Sorry for the background noise. As far, I shared at the beginning of the call that, Shira, why don't you, I'm sorry, let's go on to me. I'll go next because there's noise outside the window.
No worries, In.
Hi, good morning. My name is In Barber. I am most recently, I was the VP of Strategic Initiatives. My area is non-dues revenue generation, fundraising, development work for charities and associations. And so in that light, I'd like to continue that, where I raise money, but specifically, working with industry, creating these partnerships, creating new revenue streams. So that's where I'd like to, I'm looking in that area.
Okay, thanks, In. And Karen.
Okay. All right, let's try again. IT program management, project management, originally from the DC area and now living down in Research Triangle, North Carolina. I've worked for a lot of different types of industries because what I've always pursued is the latest and greatest technology. Most recently in the financial sector, that was the contract that I mentioned to you all, and working, even to the level of augmented reality, virtual reality is kind of a play space that I'm in. So that ties with the construction industry and some other industries who are looking to use that new technology. I'm interested in connecting with you all and seeing where there might be a fit. And thanks for your LinkedIn profile.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, so we're actually about to wrap up here. And so as some of you know, as we close up this call, I'm going to offer anybody who wants to stay on the call to come to do a short prayer call with me, because I'd like to lead people in prayer for those who are interested. However, before we do that, I'm going to do something a little different. Never done this before. I'd actually like to share an inspirational thought. I read devotionals every morning, and I normally would have just waited until the prayer call to share this, but I feel like I just want to share this publicly because this is a recorded call and I just want people to be inspired by this. Every morning I read a devotional. It's called My Utmost for His Highest. It was actually written in the 1930s, and it's just timeless. Yeah, I know, Karen, you're shaking your head. Timeless words of inspiration. And I really want to share this because I think everybody could benefit from this. And so the title, it says God's Purpose or Mine. And then it's a quote from the Gospel of Mark, and it says, it's one where it says, he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. And so some people may know that Jesus was, this is the walking on water, right? So they were in the boat and Jesus was not there. And then he walked on the water and people were like, wow. Right? Okay, so here's what, and it's a little bit long, but I just feel like it's just so impactful. We tend to think that if Jesus Christ compels us to do something and we are obedient to him, he will lead us to great success. We should never have that thought that our dreams of success are God's purpose for us. In fact, his purpose may be exactly the opposite. We have the idea that God is leading us toward a particular end or a desired goal, but he is not. The question of whether or not we arrive at a particular goal is of little importance, and reaching it becomes merely an episode along the way. What we see as only the process of reaching a particular end, God sees as the goal itself. What is my vision of God's purpose for me? Whatever it may be, his purpose is for me to depend on him and on his power now. If I can stay calm, faithful, and unconfused while in the middle of the turmoil of life, the goal of the purpose of God is being accomplished in me. God is not working toward a particular finish. His purpose is the process itself. What he desires from me is that I see him walking on the sea with no shore, no success, no goal in sight, but simply having the absolute certainty that everything is all right because I see him walking on the sea. It is the process, not the outcome, that is glorifying to God. God's training is for now, not later. His purpose is for this very minute, not for some time in the future. We have nothing to do with what will follow our obedience, and we are wrong to concern ourselves with it. What people call preparation, God sees as the goal itself. God's purpose is to enable me to see that he can walk on the storms of my life right now. If we have a further goal in mind, we are not paying enough attention to the present time. However, if we realize that moment by moment obedience is the goal, then each moment as it comes is precious. So I hope that you are, and pray that you are inspired by that, as I was this morning.
Thank you, Shara.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this part of the call. For those who want to stay on for the prayer call, you're certainly welcome. And otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing everybody else next week. Okay.
Have a nice time off, Vern. I guess you're not going to be.
Yes, that's right. Vern's not going to be with us for the month
Have a
of
nice
August.
time, nice time off.
It's going to be, you're visiting your grandchild, right? Your grandchildren?
Well, the grandchildren are coming next week, and then my wife and I are off to Europe to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I won't see you until September 7th or 8th or something like that. So
All right.
have a good month of August, and hopefully land some jobs before
There
I
you
get.
go. There you go.
All
Like I
right.
have some good reports for you. All right, Vern. God bless you. God bless everybody. And then you can stay on if you like. Thanks.